Welcome to the Pinnacle Take podcast with renowned recruiter and podcast host Benjamin Mena, where he and members of the Pinnacle Society, the most distinguished collective of recruiters in the business, take on the industry's most important issues. Get ready to take a ride with this dynamic network of professionals and seize the coveted chance for personal and professional growth.
I am so excited about this episode of the podcast because the Pinnacle Society is a community of some of the top billers across the globe, the top recruiting billers. Think of like 700, 800, 1 million, even up to $2 million. It is the society that every recruiter should think about and work towards. So I am so excited to help Pinnacle Society with their podcast. And I have our special guest, Gail Audibert, who is actually the president of the Pinnacle Society and has been a top biller year after year after year, but has been with the society since 2015. So welcome to the podcast, Gail.
Thank you, Ben. It's so exciting to have you a part of us. I've heard so many good things.
So before we jump in, first of all, let's talk about the Pinnacle Society. Mm-hmm. What is the Pinnacle Society for those that don't know about it?
The Pinnacle Society was a group that was started back in 1989. And if anyone ever has any old Tony Byrne tapes, he was one of the founders of How Do You Train to Be a Good Recruiter. And they decided, a group of 20 people, that, they wanted to create an elite group that they can exchange ideas and elevate the profession. So they started it back then. And, after a few short years, they started to become a little famous. So they got asked to speak on panels, and a lot of them became trainers, and the group grew. The idea was to meet, somewhere, twice a year and exchange ideas. And this was like pre-internet, but it's pre-cell phone, and, getting together, they kind of stayed on top of best practices in the recruiting industry, but they became the end all and be all. If you wanted to, cap off your career, or you wanted to bring it to a different level, you would attempt to join. And there were thresholds of production activity that a person would have to do for a certain number of years to even be accepted into the group. So I was a person who watched them, at conferences and watched those panelists and thought, someday I want to be that good. So I can't believe right now I'm the president. To me, it's kind of surreal, almost imposter syndrome, right? But, surrounding myself twice a year with such talent and really good people, it's a wonderful experience.
So the Pinnacle Society is some of the elite recruiters in the industry. Mm-hmm. First of all, like you saw them up on stage, you saw them talking. What really just triggered you to this is an organization or a group of people I want to be around?
Well, I had been a part of a lot of different associations. I was, I would go to all the NAPS conferences. I was on the board of the Connecticut Association when they met pretty frequently. I joined the National Insurance Recruiting Association. So I was always a really big advocate of, you have to continually train yourself if you want to be good at your craft. You can't just sit behind a desk and hope you get lucky, right? So going to those meetings and getting the continual training was super important to me. It wasn't until my son was a senior in high school that I thought, maybe I should try now, mostly because of the time commitment, right? When you're, you're getting involved in re-educating yourself, you have to recognize that you're going to have to go to these meetings and you're going to have to stay good, right? You can't get lazy. So I thought, growing a family, growing my own business, it would be a wonderful time for me to enter. And then I kicked myself wishing I did it 10 years earlier.
So you've been a top biller all these years. Has being part of the Pinnacle Society helped keep you at that level?
It actually kind of makes you wonder why you can't do more, right? We all have self-limiting beliefs. And you're like, I remember my first year in business, and this was 1984 or 85, full year. And, I billed 200,000. And at the time, the average was 60 to 80. And if you hit 100, it was great. So I broke a barrier, and I remember staying at that 200 to 300 level for years because that was huge at that time. And then, 5 or 10 years later, you're still billing that much. It's not, right? But then something changes and you hear about someone else and you just say, why can't I do that? At the Pinnacle Society, you see people putting down numbers that are just unbelievable. And it makes you think, what do I have to do to get there? Because they have the same hours in a day that I do, right? I don't know if you know Danny Cahill, but Danny Cahill is one of the premier trainers in the country and has been forever. And on top of it is a really funny person. And he, for many years, just observed, right, what made Pinnacle members click and, kind of shared that information. But many of them work less hours, not more, right? It's just kind of a different mindset.
I recently interviewed a Pinnacle member who, once I had him break down his calendar, and I thought he was an absolute workaholic. And he's like, no, I actually take months off at a time.
Yeah. And then I'm like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. So, that was definitely an eye-opening for me, when it comes to the Pinnacle members. And I think one of the also, and I want you to talk about this, is the Pinnacle members, all come from different industries too.
Very different. Before we even started broadcasting, I said there was one, person who just does toys, the toy industry. Who would have ever thought that you have a recruiter in the toy industry? I'm sure he's the best one. And he's another person. His name is Tom Keogh, that takes about a month to 6 weeks off and spends his summers in Europe and works 2 hours a day. So it really is kind of interesting how many different specialties that there are. Certainly you'll see clusters of technology, pharma and biosciences, accounting, but lots of little niches that, are really pretty interesting. And it makes you realize how many different ways you can recruit. One person, Brooke, she's on the board. She does just the lighting industry.
I met Brooke, and when she told me that she's does lights, and I'm like, wait, just lights?
Yeah, 2,000 companies, right? And big business. She has 7 or 9 employees that do everything in the lighting industry in different verticals within it. It's just amazing how many different jobs there are out there.
And that's one of the beautiful things about a organization or a community that you're working on building and up-leveling is you get to see how many other ways recruiters are doing things, and it makes you think.
Yep. But it's still all the same, right? They do it differently, but it's still all the same. Is you find a job, you fill it with a person. Your relationships with the clients are the same. So fundamentally, we all do it, but we do it a little bit differently. I think the other thing is there are lots of companies that are huge. Recruiting firms in general, unless you're part of a, kind of a large franchise, are small. So we face the same, just like we recruit the same, we face the same problems, and we're owners, so we have no one to go to. And when you're with a tight association and you're meeting with these folks 2 times a year, perhaps on, Zoom meetings even more frequently than that, and you create friendships, then you just call someone up and say, I need a contract for XYZ. I'm having this issue with LinkedIn. Is anybody else having it? So we're a community that we can kind of rely on each other for those problems that normally would drive us crazy if we just sat behind our desk and had no one to ask. So that's the added bonus, right? Getting all these really close friends that you're not really competing with, but you're in the same business and you can help each other.
Once again, I'm going to highlight this again, is I've talked to so many Pinnacle members, and in a lot of businesses, you don't want to share your secrets. You don't want to share what you're doing.
Right.
They're actively passing information along, and Gail, you just said, passing contracts along, or hey, did you try doing this? This is actually working for me. Mm-hmm. You don't see that in that many other industries because it's industry knowledge and you don't want to share your secrets, but.
Right. And that's one of the things that they look at new members is, what can this person share with us, right? It's okay to be a big biller, but we want to know, what are your secrets and what can you share with us that's going to help the group? And, that's not something that some people are comfortable with, right? But it's how we are. I mean, people will give you free advice, send you gifts. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful. So.
Well, let me just you walking down this road, what does it take to become a Pinnacle Society member?
one of the baseline parameters is that you have to have built at least $500,000 a year of 3 of the past 5 years. I mean, some people go up and down. Most of our members, they do much more than that, but that's a benchmark. And that has to be individual billings. So, there's formulas to figure out if you're in a pod, 180 or 360 or a 90-degree recruiter, how you would calculate that. And so that's kind of the baseline. And then they're looking for people who have kind of a concept to recruiting that might be different, or something that they do that's their secret or their special sauce, right? So they're looking for people with new ideas, contemporary, want to grow, want to share. More often than not, people are owners versus working for someone, because of course, you have a different perspective that way, but it's not required. So.
Okay. And how many members do you guys typically have on a yearly basis? Because I know you guys keep the membership pretty tight.
The membership is capped at 80. And most years we probably have anywhere in the mid to high 70s. We do have a lot of members that have been a part of the association forever. So we're just starting to see, like the whole world is, we're starting to see in the past 5 or 6 years, a number of people retiring or opting out because of their number of years in the business. And we're starting to bring a lot of new people in. So we have a new committee called the Future of Pinnacle, because what it looked like and how it started back in 1989 isn't necessarily how it's going to look in, 2030. So we have to pay attention to what are some of the numbers that should change, or the requirements that should change. What else do we want to give back, to our members? And one of the things is something like this podcast, right? We have a new website, we have LinkedIn posts, and we want to put out this podcast. A number of our recruiters are trainers as well. And they get pinged on a lot to speak at association meetings for states or being on Pinnacle panels. So, we're creating opportunities for them to do that. And some have, graduated to just being trainers because they've done a good job for so long.
So if somebody wants to become a Pinnacle Society member, first of all, if you're hitting those billings, what do you need to do?
You would go online onto our site and find out the name of the membership chair. Right now, it's a wonderful person by the name of Alan Fisher, and he is the vice president as well. He's been a part of our group for a while, and he could walk you through that process. We have about 7 people on the membership committee, and he could tell you all the benefits as to why you'd want to be a member and all the things that you'd want to pay attention to if you want to become a member. So.
What would you say as advice to a recruiter that's, they're looking at their desk, they're successful, but they're like, I want to take it up a notch and I want to join an elite community like this. How do you get there?
Well, here's another thing that we're trying to do is, we're in the midst of establishing a mentorship program, because we recognize that, there are people that want to take that next step. So we're trying to figure out a solution as to how can we mentor young, talented recruiters to get to this level. Because, when you think about it, you can have your boss teach you, right? But they may be limited. You can, go for some online training, but, what can we do to give back to this community to build future leaders in the recruiting industry? And how do we give back some of the training that we've gotten all this time? So we're putting together a mentorship program for those folks.
That is awesome. So Gail, I want to flip gears a little bit. I want to talk about you.
Yeah.
How did you get it? That's not what everybody else says. How did you end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Well, like everybody, by accident. No one wants to be a recruiter when they grow up. But I started out of college. I wanted to go in sales. And mostly because I felt like I was poor growing up and I wanted to make a lot of money. And I thought that's how you could do it. So I got a job selling telephones. I was really bad at it. I got fired within the first 3 months. And I applied for a number of jobs and I got an offer for a job as a recruiter. And that first failure of getting fired because I wasn't good enough, I was never going to fail again. So I got to work an hour or two early. I worked 2 hours late. I worked on Saturdays, and I was determined to succeed. But that wasn't the catalyst for me. It was a contest. And maybe 7 or 8 months into the business, and I made my placements. I was so excited. I was on the road, and they said, if you bill this much, you're going to get to go to California to a National Association conference. And I was like, I'd never been on a plane. California was on the other side of the world, and they had palm trees. I was so excited. So I billed as much in 2 months as I did the prior 9 months, just so I can get to California. Now, I probably could have bought a ticket, but, it's the winning of the contest. So I got to this conference, and I'm sure Tony Byrne was speaking at the time, but there was a gentleman by the name of Brian Tracy, who is a motivational speaker. And he got up, and I was in the third row, and he talked about self-limiting beliefs and self-actualization. And that's all you had to do was think about what you wanted in life, and you'd get there. And I was like, oh my God, this is a phenomenal secret. So I bought his cassette tapes, and I listened to them to the point where I could actually say them out loud, probably. But it that's what clicked for me was, everybody in my office was going for $80,000 a year. And I'm like, I'm going to do 200, back in the 80s, because I could. I wanted to get to a certain level, and it had me never look back. So you can see why I like associations, right? Like that could be the trigger where it just changes the trajectory of your career.
So you really think going to that one meeting completely changed your life?
That and Brian Tracy. So 10 years later, I met him, and I got my picture taken with him. I was so excited. He thought I was a nut bar, but I had sent him, a couple of, fan letters. I also sent one to Danny Cahill at one point in time when he did his first training session ever. And I'm like, oh my God, Danny, you're the best speaker. You're going to be so good someday. I was 23 at the time. I was right. I just want to point that out. I was right. But yes, I write lots of fan letters to people.
So you're succeeding in your career.
Mm-hmm.
When did you finally make the jump to your own firm, and how did that come about?
I was 25.
Okay.
And so I was young. Someone in my firm had approached me. It was 11 years older than me. And she said, I think I'm going to strike out on my own. You want to come? And I said, no. And then I thought about it. I'm like, now or never, and I had a very supportive husband who's like, why not? Like, we don't have really any expenses. If you're going to do it, now would be the time before we started a family. So, at that time, there was no such thing as hybrid work-life balance or work from home, right? There was none of that. So I thought if I was going to start a family someday, which I wanted desperately, I was going to have to create, a culture for myself that would allow me to, raise children and be a mom. Because it's always been my most important role. So that, because my family, I just didn't want to sacrifice working and family. And most of my friends weren't working. They stayed home with their children when they raised them. And I knew I really wanted to do both. So that's why I started my own company.
That is awesome. And you consistently have been a big biller. When you were at that company, you were one of the top. At your own company, because of jumping into Pinnacle, like you definitely know that you're one of the top. Like, what'd you do different than everybody else?
I set my expectations high. I put my clients first, right? It was never really, I don't want to say it was never really about the money. Of course, you know that you need to make goals, but I'd never sacrifice my reputation or a person or a client to make money. So if I thought a job wasn't good for someone, I would let them know. If I thought a candidate wasn't good for a client, I would let them know. And I think what happens there for me, that everybody's different, but for me is it built a lot of trust with the clients that I did have. compared to all of the other recruiters that recruited in my space. I do the insurance industry. There's hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of recruiters in that space. But I had a lot of loyalty because they knew that about me. So I think that was, kind of my secret is it prevented me from having to constantly go out and recruit new clients, constantly go out and recruit new candidates, because I never had a bad reputation, in terms of having to find new business because it kept coming. And I think there's other firms that do that too. I'm not saying that I'm the only one, but that's been my success so far.
And what I've learned from the interviews with all these top billers, such as yourself, it's, once you've built that reputation, you've built that brand. Mm-hmm. And the brand is what sells. And right. It's amazing how fast you could damage your brand.
You can. Yeah. There's no sense in fighting, right? Like, you just have to make sure that you're always doing the right thing and you're above board. For me, that was always important. And it made me sleep better at night.
How, did you choose the insurance industry, or did it choose you?
The firm that I went with, everybody was an engineering recruiter, and they had someone, I think, that literally died, and they gave me his desk. So it was, a stack of this many resumes. I forget his name. It was Norm or something like that. So I got his desk, and they didn't know anything about insurance. So I had to learn it. They had to learn it. But I worked in Hartford, Connecticut, which was at the time the insurance capital of the world. So, it made sense that there should be a lot of business there. And certainly there has been.
That is odd. It's funny how the industry sometimes chooses you.
Yeah. It's a fascinating industry. I mean, insurance, positions, the insurance industry, it really runs the world. Like, there is no headline in the newspaper that doesn't have an insurance mechanism. Political risk, hurricane, disaster, everything is insured. And if you're not insured, it's a problem, right? Your health, your auto, your home, everything. It's fascinating to me.
So I want to kind of you've been a top biller. We're going to talk about some of the traits of being a top biller, but you've now taken your extra time, and you're now community building for the Pinnacle Society. Like where's that coming about? Why are you doing that? There's so many things that you could do, but you're really just trying to uplift an entire community. Why and how?
Probably because it did so much for me. I also, I was the president of another association called the National Insurance Recruiting Association. And, let's talk about the difference between the two, which is pretty cool. The National Insurance Recruiting Association was a group of recruiters where we also share best practices, but we mostly did split business, right? So you have to trust each other because you're literally each other's competitors. And we would contact each other when I had a job and you had a person, blah, 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 blah. And we would, trade, business. And they literally bill about $1 million to $2 million in splits each year by learning to trust and educate each other. And I got a lot out of finding out about, I learned about LinkedIn, right? From another recruiter who is a little more astute than me. So, I had those educational experiences with NAPS and then CAPS, the Connecticut Association, and I got involved in the Insurance Recruiting Association. And I recognized, belonging to Pinnacle, that, most of my career has been shaped by my peers. Now I have a daughter, actually 2 daughters in the business, not with me, but elsewhere. And, I really feel like an association like this is what's going to help them survive, right? I would love them to be a part of the National Association, which they are. I would love them to be a part of the Pinnacle Society someday. So I'd like to see it, get, established so that it will have a future. So all of those people that we're bringing into this industry, will have a place that they can go to as a resource, for our industry.
So you're looking at helping build a legacy because somebody else's legacy helped you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's true.
And it's so cool that you have family in the business too.
Mm-hmm.
My 5-month-old was out hunting purple squirrels yesterday. So
Listen, and that's the part that's really amazing is when my oldest daughter, she started as an accountant and she was a terrible accountant, just like I was a terrible salesperson. She did it for a couple of years and she interviewed and, a couple of people approached her about doing recruiting. And she's like, Mom, should I do it? And I'm like, no, don't. It's too, because the ups and downs of recruiting. We have highs and we have a lot of lows, right? We have a lot of lows because the highs make up for it. But I was afraid for her. And then she went into it and it was a struggle at first. And then her career took off. And, she brought her other sister on, to support her with it. And it really is amazing, to see. I'm like, they're going to be way better than me. But, they're both, starting their families. And my son's in insurance. I have to mention him too. I got him into the insurance industry. But, I want to see them be a part of something like this someday. Right now I just whisper in their ear, but eventually they're going to stop listening.
Well, there's a lot of great recruiters out there that can definitely listen to.
Yeah. And there's a lot of recruiters that bring their family into it for the same reasons. It's, they don't think they're going to do it. And then all of a sudden they have, their kids working with them. There's a group actually within Pinnacle that's being started. One of our members is going to, kind of foster it. And it's for so many people that have their children working with them. And, how do you manage that? How do you train it? How do you migrate the business over to them when you choose to exit it? So.
Well, before we jump over to the Pinnacle Pointers, is there anything else that you would love to share about either the Pinnacle Society or your own background?
The only thing that's on my mind at the moment is that my daughter is at the doctor's because one of them just had a baby and the other one's having identical twins. And they both hit the 5 pound, 7 ounce mark and their heads are down. So that's all I could think about. So I would like to share that with everybody. I'm going to be a grandmother of 4 pretty soon.
So when this does come out, Gail might be a little busy when you reach out to her.
I know, that's because that's the most important thing, right? It's the most important thing.
This is why we do it. It's because of family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we want to jump over to the Pinnacle Pointers. And what this is just a little bit of like actionable advice for somebody listening to this podcast that can like learn, grow from, what's working, what can I try out? So one of the first questions that I have, if a brand new recruiter that's just getting started in this industry runs across the Pinnacle Society and yourself, Gail, what advice would you give them to succeed in our space?
I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I'm going to tell you what I did the past year and a half is listening to everything that was going on at the Pinnacle Society, at other association meetings. I felt that there was a huge change that was coming in the recruiting industry. And I remember when we went to Monster, right? And they said, Monster is going to change us and it's going to kill us. I think Monster is almost out of business now. And when, I got my first computer, which was like astounding, and faxes and then emails, like some of those changes were huge in our industry. But the past 3 years, it's mind blowing how many different tools that we can use to elevate our productivity. And if you're not learning and embracing some of the tech stack that's coming out and taking the time to learn it and put it together, you're going to be in the dust. And they talk about artificial intelligence right now. And, those that are using AI are going to be the ones that, make it. Well, we've had artificial intelligence in a lot of things already that we didn't even realize. But, I kind of took a time out last year to really reinvent myself and do everything that made me uncomfortable. So it's doing videos, it's podcasts, it's, getting a new software system or an applicant tracking system, using drip campaigns, trying out all this different technology. And listen, I'm that mother that can't figure out how to use the television remote, right? So I blew up my head trying to figure all these things out and surrounded myself with some really good people. I have someone that's now working with me to help me do all of that. You need to pay attention. If you want to get better, you need to pay attention to what's new coming up so that you can adapt. Staying stuck in a system isn't going to work. Obviously, making phone calls is critical, reaching out to clients and candidates, filling jobs, right? It's still basic, but how you do it and how quickly you can do it is going to make all the difference in the world. So
why'd you decide to kind of blow everything up and reinvent? Like what was the trigger for that?
really kind of watching the signs of what was happening in the marketplace. Think about this for a second. If you get a phone call and you don't recognize the number, do you pick it up? No,
Not anymore.
Not anymore, right? It's going to be, a auto warranty company or something, right? So, and many of us have made our livings on calling people up on the phone. So how do we enhance that? We still need to use the phone, but we need to send out texts, send out emails, send out videos, do LinkedIn posts. They have to see us 20 or 30 times and hear our name for them to even recognize, maybe I'll pick this call up, right? Maybe I'll contact that person. I know that we used to just knock on the door. There's a great Sebastian Maniscalco, show where he's like, someone knocks on your door now and everybody ducks, right? Just calling someone up on the phone, sometimes you might say, hey, text them and say, can I give you a call, right? It's like knocking on the phone to be able to call someone. We have to pay attention to these things that are happening and how quickly can we do it.
What is right now working on the business development side to get new clients?
For me, it has been reaching out to clients on video.
Do you do video within your first message, or is it kind of part of a sequence?
No, it's usually a personal video in the first message to clients, assuming they're not going to pick up the phone, right? Or I may leave a message and I don't know that they're going to listen to it. I will either through LinkedIn or through an email leave a message, a voicemail message, but it's a video message. It may have their back, if I'm recruiting them, it might have their LinkedIn on the background. But in many cases, it's me just talking to them, putting a name and a face together so they know I'm a real person and not a synced message that they're going to get with 100 other people, right? It's a personal message to them. They could see me, they could hear me, and they could decide whether they contact me back. I get a lot of response to that.
Oh, yeah, and that's one thing that I feel like a lot of recruiters aren't doing, at least at the moment, is that slowing down to speed up.
Mm-hmm.
It's, so often it's, hey, can I put like 500 people into a drip campaign and hit go and go do something else? But you're saying right now that what's working for you is the slowing down, making a personalized video, and it's helping win more work, and your response rates are going way up.
Yeah. And at the last conference we had 2 weeks ago, we had a panelist of, talent acquisition, and every single person said they liked video.
Okay. So listeners, do more video.
Yeah. Call me. I'll tell you which ones are good.
Like, what do you just out of curiosity, what are you saying in those intro videos for those new clients, prospective clients?
The same thing I would say on a phone call. Hi, my name's Gail Audibert. I wanted to contact you. I have a person that we're trying to work with who's a blah, 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 blah. Thought you might make sense. I know you're connected to so-and-so. Give me a buzz if you'd like to talk about it further. So it's the same thing, but it's a video of me talking. I might make a connection of someone we know. They might know me from the past, haven't talked to you in a while, but it's just, reaching out. It's a nice warm call.
And do you also
showing your stuff, right? Like that you might do that. I present candidates that way too. So because I might not get them on the phone, but now they can listen to the presentation and see the resume on video.
Okay, so you're actually doing like some NPC like videos too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And recruiting. Secret weapon. So what has been a book that has had a huge impact on your own personal career? A book, The Secret.
Why?
It's all about self-actualization and having a positive mindset and a positive attitude, and kind of calling the right things into your universe. I mean, it's not just work, but it's everything in life. But, especially if you're in any sales role, you get pounded with a lot of negativity, whether it's, things that someone did that wasn't very nice, or things that happen to your candidates that aren't very fair, or, sad stories that you hear day after day. And it could bring your energy down. And you really I need to make sure that, I put that in its place and say, let's focus on what's good. Let's focus on what's not hard. Let's focus on the fact that I can do it versus it hasn't happened. And it makes those dips not last as long. I mean, we all go into them, but you got to bounce out, right? As I said to my kids when they were little, buck up, right? Buck up and realize that the world is a good place and there are good clients out there and you could fill any job that's given to you. So
that is awesome. And I know we've kind of covered this, but I'm going to ask this in the Pinnacle Pointers anyways. What does the Pinnacle Society mean to you?
When I first got in, it was a feeling of accomplishment. And, I felt like I made it. And then afterwards, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I just began. I just began a new path in my career. And now, and I remember people saying this before, and I didn't get it at first, is even though you see these people twice a year, it's a really close network of friends or people that you can rely on. And that's hard to get now. I remember when my kids were little and I'd meet people at the soccer fields and at baseball games, and you'd have these kind of seasonal friendships while they were at certain ages. But I see the friendships that people have developed at the Pinnacle because they're going through these, kind of work situations, and they're really quite close. And I've met people that, took me through a lot of different points in my life. And it was wonderful to have one more opportunity to build relationships and friendships.
That's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Now, looking at yourself, what do you think has been a huge driver for your own personal success?
You mean in terms of why I wanted to
just why you're successful? What's been an internal thing that's been pushing you?
No idea. That's a good question. The first thing that pops into my mind is my father. My father was the eternal optimist. And I remember way back when, and he said, Gail, you could make it to the Olympics. And all I could do was a cartwheel at the time. But he just had that kind of energy. Everyone loved being around him, but he was really positive and he was always complimentary. So he kind of gave me that feeling like I could do anything I wanted. And the other person who was always really important to me was my nanny. She was my Italian grandmother who lived with us. And, said that family was everything. So my combination, right, is I thought I could do everything, but family was really important. So I wanted to create a career where I could really support my family and give them whatever they wanted, and believed that I could do it.
And recruiting is that perfect avenue for that.
Mm-hmm. It really is, because I don't report to anyone but myself. So I could make those decisions, what's right or wrong for my family versus having someone dictate to me. Not that there's not a lot more freedom now, but, at the time there wasn't. So.
And I'm going to ask this question twice. One's going to be for the beginning of your career, and the other one's going to be after you've launched your firm. Mm-hmm. But if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with yourself when you first got into recruiting, those first few weeks or the first few months, what advice would you give yourself?
I worked really hard. I probably would have not worked Sundays. I probably would have taken a day off. I'm not sure that sometimes all the busyness I did made 100% sense, but I was trying really, really hard. I would have given myself a little grace.
And same question, but when shortly after you launch your firm, if you everything that you know now, the ups, the downs, the industry knowledge that you have, if you got a chance to sit down with yourself at the beginning of your firm launch, what would you tell yourself?
I think that one of the things that I never did, and I would have done differently, is that in recruiting, we have a tendency to look for people who can just sell, right? Because I had staff of maybe 14 at one point. So everybody was recruiters and you had some admin support. But I think I would have done extraordinarily better if I partnered up with someone who had a strong operational and organizational bent. Because one of the things that's most difficult in our industry is getting that information, having a process, and we focus so much on the sales that we forget that all of that business piece and that operational piece is critical. And that wasn't something that was, I don't want to say de rigueur, but it wasn't as important. But I see some firms that have excelled because they gave equal weight to someone with that kind and importance to someone with that kind of experience. And that's what made them go from good to great. So, encouraging anybody that has a firm to find that other half, because most really good salespeople are not necessarily the operational expert, right? They're not, and you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be spending all your time figure out your applicant tracking system. Have someone just make it work for you. So I think that's the advice I would have given myself after I started my firm.
Oh, that's great advice. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
I would love to share that you should be listening to Ben Mina's podcast. I think we're going to have we're going to try to get every Pinnacle member on there. They're all different. They're all unique. But I'm looking forward to a long relationship with you, Ben, so that you can kind of spotlight, what we're good at, but also spotlight, the different members that we have. And I hope that, some of the information that everyone shares is going to spark, like Tony Byrne or, Brian Tracy did for me, or Danny Cahill back when, and launch your career in the right direction.
That is awesome. Well, Gail, I just want to say thank you so much for, jumping on, sharing. It's one of the biggest things that for the listeners that the Pinnacle members, if you were able to get in touch with one of them, I have been blown away by the years of time that Pinnacle members have helped me with my recruiting business and my recruiting career. Mm-hmm. Like, it is an organization that really just at the end of the day, it's an elite organization of elite recruiters, but at the end of the day, they're not just helping themselves get better. They're helping the rest of the community get better.
Mm-hmm. The generosity, the outreach program that we have helps thousands of people. The members that we have, the number of groups that they're involved with. One of our members raised almost $750,000 for, underserved communities. Another person, canoed down the Mississippi River and raised, $1 million for vets. Like, they don't just do one thing. Another one did it for cancer. They raise millions. They're just a generous group of people. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, one more thing. And for the listeners, if they want to follow you, how do they follow you?
You mean on my LinkedIn profile?
Yeah. You can say LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads.
I'm only on LinkedIn, Gail Audibert. And I just started posting a year ago. I'm the Jerry Seinfeld of posting. I just post on whatever I think about when I wake up in the morning. But, would love to communicate with anyone that way. I speak to a lot of different recruiters when they ask me questions. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Gail, thank you so much. And for the listeners, I hope you guys crush it and make 2024 your best year yet.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Pinnacle Take podcast with Benjamin Mena.